Happy Thursday. Welcome back to Daily Bible Readings with Wesley Center. And today I want to start by talking about just the timeliness of the RCL, the Revised Common Lectionary. I've talked about this before, how these daily Bible readings are part of the Revised Common Lectionary. So they were set in advance. How far in advance? Well, the Revised Common Lectionary came online officially in 1994. But it was in testing and under use for about 9 years before that. So it's not like these were picked yesterday, like the texts that you see when I post them to Facebook, that they were just picked the other day, or they were picked a long time ago and set up in this 3-year cycle of daily readings and readings for worship and the days, holy days of the church. So the RCL just sort of has this timeliness, and it always amazes me how it just it fits our situation, especially like today, Psalm 116 for today. By the way, our texts for today are Psalm 116, 1 through 4 and 12 through 19, but just read the whole thing. It's a really good psalm. Of course, they're all good. Isaiah 25, 1 through 5, and then 1 Peter 18 through 12. But anyway, so yeah, the RCL just kind of has this timeliness about it. But, the timeliness of the Revised Common Lectionary is really the timeliness of Scripture at work. It's the fact that it's all Scripture. That's what makes the Revised Common Lectionary so timely, is this timelessness of Scripture. Because Scripture talks to the human condition. It's all about human experiences, especially human experiences of God, of life, and really human experiences of God in our lives. So Psalm 116. Psalm 116 is really a hymn of thanksgiving. It's words of thanksgiving from a survivor, presumably from a life-threatening illness. The author of Psalm 116 doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail about what it is that's happened to them or where they've been, but we get the idea that it was probably a pretty life-threatening illness that they had survived. And they, in this psalm, are acknowledging God and identifying Him as the source of their survival and strength. And that's something that we can all relate to, and especially these days we can relate to. And a lot of people, fortunately, if you're not one of the people that can really identify with this, you're very fortunate. But we do have friends and neighbors that we see every day, we see on the news, that are coming through this illness, and just it has changed their perspective on things. And that's where this psalmist is coming from. So he's acknowledging and identifying God as the source of his survival and his strength, and we should all be able to relate that. I hope we can relate to that. And like I said, some of us now more than others, and it's this, the thing we keep hearing in the popular culture is that we're all in this together. Now, at the same time, you also think, well, some of us are probably more in this than others. I saw something the other day where it was talking about how they were tired of celebrities that kept telling them that that we were all in the same boat, and they're like, yeah, but your boat is a lot nicer than mine. Truth. Anyway, but we're all in this together, and some of us more than others, and some of us seem to have a hard time, I think, with sympathizing with the weaker or the less fortunate people than ourselves. One of the things that I think has amazed me and amazed other people, rightly so, is that in the midst of all this suffering that's going on, there seems to be a disconnect in compassion, that we don't really see our connectedness as individuals and our connectedness as part of humanity. Some of us don't seem to think we share in the same human condition. And that leads me to bring up this guy, John Donne, and it's called Meditation 17. But if you don't know, and I apologize if you're somebody who knows me and you've heard me talk about John Donne before. You're going to hear me talk about him again. He is a really important person. He lived in the 17th century, so that's like 1600s. Actually, the end of the 16th century into the early 17th century. And he was Dean of St. Paul's. And he had suffered from an incredible illness. And I'm not really exactly sure what it was. In his Meditation 12, he talks about having this case of the vapors. And he talks about this illness that is, seemingly random and don't know where it comes from, and it can strike anybody. It's a very timely thing. And so he had been struck with this illness that brought him to to death's door, I guess is a safe bet to say. And as he was recuperating and recovering, struggling with this illness, he wrote this book called Devotions Upon Emergent Occasions. And what this book is it's a daily collection of a prayer and a meditation, and what's the other word he uses? An expostulation, because 17th century. And so here he is, he's the dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in England, and he's recovering from this case of the vapors, which I have to presume was probably some kind of virus. And he is reflecting on his life as he recovers from this, much the way that the psalmist in Psalm 116 is doing. And he writes what is probably one of the most famous meditations in English literature. And if you went through high school and had to take a class in English literature, if you took a basic English literature class in college, you have probably heard of Meditation 17. It's the most famous of these. And it's the one there where we get the line, "For whom the bell tolls." Now, the trigger for this was that he was in his sickbed recuperating, and he heard the bells of the church tolling. Now, would have been a pretty common thing in 17th century England. They used the bells, counted out the hours of the day. They called people to prayer. But then on certain occasions, they would ring, and you knew something else was up because it was not the usual time, or it was also a different pattern. And he hears the bells, and the bells are tolling for a funeral, because somebody has died. And he just kind of apparently says to himself, I wonder who the bell's tolling for. Somebody died. And then it hits him that, it very well they could be ringing for him, and he just doesn't know it. People are nice enough to tell him how badly off he is. And so that gets him into this whole way of thinking that, he says to himself, "Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee," because he realizes through all this that he shares in the human condition with everybody else. All his parishioners, all the people he's ever known, all the people he'll never know, they all share in this human condition, that they all sing with the same voice as the psalmist in Psalm 116. If we survive, if we have health and life, it's solely and thankfully because of God. And so I'm gonna read for you, because I'm sure you have quick access to Psalm 116. I know you probably don't have quick access to this, but these famous words from John Donne. He says, "No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." We have this disconnect in compassion where people have failed to see that they are a part of humanity, this humanity that God created and called into existence and called good. And you can't just isolate yourself from it, social distance yourself from it, and suddenly have all these people just disappear into the background. Now, it's really, really hard. It's hard, there are a lot of people in the world, and there are a lot of people you'll never see or you'll never meet, but there is a serious truth to what the good Reverend Donne is saying. There is a serious truth to what the psalmist is saying in 116, that we are all connected to each other. And from the Christian point of view, we are all connected to each other from God and through God. And so you can't just say, you know, oh, that's just them. That's somebody else's death. It's not mine. No, just like John Donne says, a little piece of you died too. We'll see you tomorrow. Boop.